Dean Graziosi, and thank you so much for having the faith in us to get my program, to get my book, and to get this DVD. Let me just give you a quick little background on this information. We had so many of our students telling us how they were making money with notes, buying bad debt and transferring over, using no money by finding bad debt. I know that might sound a little complicated right now, but finding bad debt, finding somebody who wanted to buy the debt, making money in the middle without using any of their own money. Long story short, one of my coaches from my Real Estate Success Academy is a note expert. He has over 80 of them of his own. So he knows it better than anybody. It's not my expertise, but I dug deep, I got him on the phone and drilled down to find the techniques that can get you making money on the internet, because that's where you can find notes. That means loans that need to be sold or they're not getting serviced right. Also on the internet, you can find buyers of these notes, you can hand them off, and you can make money in the middle. What I'd like to do right now is get to this very special presentation that we created through a live event we did with Talmadge, through a phone call to go deeper on the techniques and share them all with you to see if you'd like to start making money with notes, using the internet, and not using any of your own money. Enjoy this. Talmadge, so glad to have you on the call. Let me just give a little introduction here. What we want to do in this VIP training is give you the techniques that you can go out and do exactly what Talmadge teaches. So we're gonna let Talmadge teach. I'm gonna try not to interrupt them too much. Talmadge is gonna teach you about notes, how to make money with notes. And Talmadge, so glad to have you here.
My name is Talmadge Bell, as he mentioned, and my background is in accounting and real estate, and accounting and taxes. And I got into real estate because of the clients that I had, and so they taught me how to do real estate, like Dean said, 40 years ago. In fact, the first deals I didn't require any cash, any credit, or any loans, because I was in the military and nobody would give me loans and I didn't have any cash. And those are what we call, I call them lease wraps, but we call them sandwich leases. You lease a property and then sublease it to somebody else at a better price. In the last 3 years of being in the military, I worked on that aggressively. It started out pretty slow, but by the end of that 3 years, I had 93 lease options. Back in those days, there was little spreads. Most of them were between $50 and $75 spread between the lease I had and the sublease. But nowadays, that'd be more like maybe $200 between the two. And so I got started that way, and that's a cash flow investment. What is cash flow investing? It's basically buying a periodic income instead of getting an immediate cash in your infusion into your bank account. So it's a different way to look at investing. And if you like that kind of investing, then you'll find that it's going to be very, very powerful for you, but it builds over time. So periodic income is kind of like, say you buy a tax deed, you like tax deeds and you buy that, and say you got it for $1,000. You could quickly flip that and probably get $2,000 off of that piece of land or property, whatever it was that you got on the tax deeds. But you could also take that and instead sell it for $250 a month. And 250 times 12 is $3,000, so you'd get $3,000 instead of $2,000. That's periodic income instead of a lump sum right now. All right, so I just want to point out one more time, this type of investment is kind of like the patient person's pathway to financial freedom. And I know a lot of people aren't as patient as I am, and like I said, I'll show you how to use it where you don't have to be so patient. But this is what this is all about. Over time, picking up these cash flows, just like I picked up those leases, you have a set amount of money coming in regularly. If you keep on compounding it, pretty soon you have $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 a month coming in automatically. It takes some work to get through it, and so for a lot of people, it's better for them to get a chunk of cash, get a chunk of cash, get a chunk of cash, and that's okay too. I just happen to like this. Let me give you some classic examples of this. Credit cards. When you pay for something with a credit card, you get in essence a chunk of money, right? And the credit card company is going to get monthly payments over a period of time. I think we all know they get back a lot more than what we paid for, right? Okay. Another thing is, I'm sure almost every town has a particular road where there are car loans, car companies, car dealerships who say, buy here, pay here. We finance everyone, right? That's a cash flow investment. In fact, I have bought from car dealers when they were a little bit tight for cash. I've gone in and bought their loans. And now I give them cash and I get monthly payments coming in. Typically, you buy the loan at less than what's owed. That's discounting it, so we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But that's a cash flow investment. The dealer goes down the auction, buys a car for $1,000, puts the car in his lot, hopefully gets at least $1,000 down, and then $50 a month for the next 12 months or something. And he'll make a lot more than what his lump sum of cash came out to be. Here's some other types of cash flows. Obviously, all you know about the rental properties, and some of you don't want to have that. Of course, rental properties do have tenant problems. We'll find that notes don't have that. That's one small advantage. Apartments, office buildings, malls, storage facilities, and boat slips. I put that one on there because I had one of those many, many years ago. Partnership with myself and some others, 6 of us. We each own 1/6 of a 28-foot sailboat in San Diego, by the way. I talked to somebody earlier here that was from San Diego. And the thing was, I was membership of a club that owned some of the slips there. So I rented back to my partnership the slip. So I had cash flow coming in from that every month, bigger than what my membership dues were. And so, again, a cash flow. It's just, I just think that way, probably because it's the only way I could get into the business when I first started. And then, of course, there's mortgage notes. We get a mortgage to buy a house, so we get a chunk of money. The mortgage company gets all those payments over time, right? And for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to be talking about mortgage notes, but a unique kind of mortgage note. It's always going to be taken back by the person who owned the property. And so they sell a house for $100,000. They're desperate to get rid of it. The person who's trying to buy it from them only has $10,000 down. The bank will only loan $70,000 to that particular person. And so now there's $20,000 the seller didn't get. Well, he could sell it at $80,000 if he wanted to, or he could carry back that note of $20,000. And now he's got monthly payments coming in. He's going to get the rest of his $20,000 sometime, okay? That's what we're talking about in this case. Okay, so let's talk about what a non-performing note is. So you'll have these notes sometimes where the note payer, in this case, we're pretty much always talking about the homeowner. In other words, he bought the house. He's paying on his first mortgage of $70,000. He put $10,000 down, but he still owes the seller that sold it to him that other $20,000. And so he's supposed to be making payments on that second as well as on the first mortgage. Okay, so a non-performing note is when he doesn't make the payment on the second. He's merrily going along keeping the first, but he just gets later and later or stops paying. Example I'm going to work with here in a little while, just flat out never made a payment on it all. Okay, so that's a non-performing note. Also, we could classify notes that have been irregular and are now longer than just the current 1 or 2 months. So they pay and then they're late for 45 days, and they pay again, and then they're late for 60 days, and these notes pile up, and you're into the note. Maybe it's a 20-year note, and you're into it 2 years, and he's only made 18 payments in that period of time. So again, it's technically not a non-performing, but from the mindset of the person holding the note, that's not performing well enough for him. And then there's some other situations that I'm going to tell you about now that are not technically a non-performing note, but it puts the seller in the same frame of mind as if he had a non-performing note. And as an example is, the payments are always late. Now, if you're a rental property investor, you put up with that because you know that some people are going to be late all the time. Keep in mind, though, the individual I talked about carried this note back, and they didn't want it in the first place, okay? So now they're anxious about it. Maybe they moved to another state, maybe it's an older retired person, and they get frustrated about the fact that the payment doesn't come in there right on the 5th, just like their Social Security check does. And so they just don't like it, okay? Payments are often late. There's a big balloon payment. So if you don't know what a balloon payment is, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's do it anyway. Balloon payment means we have a note that's supposed to be paying off, say it's a 30-year amortization. So our payment is $100 a month for 30 years, but it has a balloon at some point. Maybe it's 5 years. At the end of 5 years, we paid that loan down a little bit, don't pay off much in 5 years on a 30-year note, but all of a sudden, the whole note is due. So why do you write notes like that? Because you expect the homeowner to eventually refinance it and get rid of that note when the balloon comes up, right? So you will have people holding that note. They wrote it so they get a balloon. They said, well, okay, I'll carry back that $20,000, but I certainly don't want to wait around for 30 years for it. So you can pay me for 2 or 3 years, make the payments on it, but at the end of that period of time, you got to go out and refinance and get me all my money. So that's a balloon. So you'll see those once in a while, well, actually fairly regularly, and you'll see that people who are waiting for that balloon begin to get nervous, and they're thinking it's not going to pay. And then the best buy is it doesn't pay, and I'll show you why it's so good later on. They don't pay that balloon payment. Now what's he got? He's got just this payment coming in. He was counting on $19,000 more coming in. Okay, it didn't come in. All right, that makes it, in the mind of the seller, really non-performing because the balloon wasn't paid, even though the monthly payments might be continuing on. And then finally, you'll have plenty of people who just don't like the idea of getting monthly payments. It irritates them. It's interesting dealing with them. It's just not in their mind frame that they want to have a monthly payment coming in. It just doesn't click in their mind. And then the biggest one perhaps is the note holder needs cash. I'm going to show you some interesting ways to buy notes when we have an individual that has this note, has payments coming in, but they all of a sudden need cash right now. And I'll show you some really fun ways to work with that situation.
I described a tactic of buying notes that we would call non-performing or delinquent. And the reason I covered that was because it's a place where you can buy notes for huge discounts. Mostly people who have a note that's not paying on time or hasn't been paying for a while, those are real don't-wanters, just like we look for in real estate. So the comparison there is exactly what we're trying to find, someone who doesn't want what they have. Even notes that are not delinquent, though, we'll find people who have them just don't want them because they're not a person who wants cash flow. And so a person with a note that's not delinquent still might sell it. Maybe not at as big of a discount as a person who has a delinquent note, but still they'll sell them, and often at discounts as steep as even 50%, even though the note's not delinquent. Another thing I pointed out is you were looking at those delinquent notes. It is an asset that has a problem with it right now, and just like when you buy fixer-uppers with property, if you're going to do fixer-uppers, you have to have the skill to do that, or at least you have to know how to manage people who will fix them up. And I mentioned the skill you needed in buying a delinquent note. You had to know how to deal with people who had been delinquent in the past and get them to come current or most of the time current. And then you add value to it. Just like on a fixer-upper property, you're just doing a fixer-upper on a note. You're fixing it up. And once you've done that, it's worth a heck of a lot more than when you originally bought it.
Now then, why would we want to purchase notes? Okay, non-performing notes. The non-performing note is supposed to be a piece of garbage, especially if it's second. You know, there's no payments coming in. What in the heck is it worth? Well, okay, let me give you some advantages here. First of all, nobody else wants to buy it, so you don't have any competitions there. Nobody's going to be trying to beat you up and pay more for it. Institutional, or in other words, there are companies who are in the business of buying mortgage notes. They don't want to buy them. Number one, they don't buy non-performing notes. And number two, they buy first mortgages. It'd be very hard to find one who buys second mortgages. Now then, all of us that have real estate rental properties, we know what an alligator is, don't we? All right? It's upside down. We're getting less money out of it than we're having to pay, and we're paying maintenance and repair. Well, doesn't this sound like an alligator to you? I've got a note here. It's been, I made it 2 years ago, and the payments are supposed to be $210 a month, but he's never paid me. Would you please buy this $19,500 note for me? Does that sound like you just lost $19,500 by paying that? Okay, so that's what these are like. So I'm going to lay out for you right now a note that I'll talk about several times throughout our discussion. And it's a one that I did a couple years ago. I just like it because of the way it ended up. But it was a $19,500 note. The property was sold in Independence, Missouri, and the person who bought it paid $69,900. They could only get a $50,000 loan, and so the seller, who was a buy fix-up guy, carried back $19,500. 10%, $210 a month on 15 years. Okay, that's what he's supposed to get. Now this guy, he wasn't only in this, he was in a lot of other things, so it was just kind of a side thing. I got a call from him a couple of years ago, He's on the golf course, and he said, my accountant told me that you buy these crappy notes. Okay? And he says, I got one that's never had a payment made on it for 2 years. It's $19,500. I'll give it to you for $1,000 right now. Okay? Well, still, if there's no payments, what's the point of getting $1,000, right? What would you pay for it? It's a piece of paper, but it's never had a payment on it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that note several times, but doesn't that sound like an alligator, right? Okay. And then, of course, there are plenty of people who don't want these notes. As I mentioned earlier, they almost always never wanted it when they took it back, and they really don't want it now that payments haven't been coming in. Okay, so that's the reason. Now, you get very large discounts. And I have to admit that $19,500 for $1,000 right out the door is a better discount than I normally get, okay? But I normally buy at around about 10 to 15% of what the note's worth. There's no established value for a non-performing note. In other words, you can't go out and pick up a Kelly Blue Book like you do on your car and say, okay, this is a $20,000 note, 10% interest, it's worth that, you know? It doesn't happen, especially if it's non-performing. It cannot be done. So there's no established value for it. Nobody knows what a note's worth. If it's a first position and it's had on-time payments for at least a year or more, you can get a consensus amongst investors about what that note's worth. But that's about the best. That's a consensus if you talk to 2 or 3 investors. On a second position note, there's nobody out there. There's not enough people to know what, and if it's non-performing, it's basically garbage. So, no way to know what that note's worth. It's difficult for the seller. If you're trying to invest in it, there's no way to know what it's worth either. Okay.
But the reason someone sells a note, just what Talmadge is saying, is because when something cash flows, they might be owed, let's just take a round number of $20,000. They might be owed $20,000, and they're getting $200 a month on that $20,000. But so that note exists for the $20,000, and it's probably attached to some collateral. But somebody, rather than having, you know, $1 spread over 10 years, they want 50 cents right now. So someone may be hurting a little for money, not necessarily delinquent, but want cash now, especially in today's economy. A lot of people want some cash, need cash. They want to liquefy, you know, their assets or liquidate their assets. So again, when he's talking about a cash flow, meaning somebody might have a note where somebody owes them 20, but for $10,000 they'd sell it immediately if they could get all the money up front. And that's just you know, a dramatized example of what Talmadge was talking to. I just want to make sure everybody's got that really quick.
That's a perfect illustration too. Any one of us might have $200 a month coming in for the next 10 years, but all of a sudden the car breaks down, or the daughter's college tuition comes up, or want to take the wife on a cruise or something like that, and rather than $200 a month coming in for a long time, give me $5,000 right now. So perfect illustration, Dean. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now, where do you find most of your notes?
Like I mentioned before, I find them from accountants, attorneys, and real estate agents. Those are the people that have clients who have notes. It's easy. You just talk to them, let them know about you, especially if you want to take on bad notes. Now, not everybody wants to do that, but if you let it be known in the community that you buy delinquent notes, I guarantee you there's nobody else in the community that's going to tell accountants and attorneys and real estate agents that all you want to look at are notes that aren't paying.
Now let's talk about how I buy these notes. I had to figure this out over time, and I made a few mistakes along the way, but here's the things that I learned. Number one, even though you're holding a note with payments coming in, you are not a bank. What does that mean? You don't have any ironclad rules that you have to follow. If you want to cut the payments in half, you can. If you want to lower the interest rate, you can. If you want to forgive half the note, you can. I'll tell you later why you might do these things. But if you've got a payer and they haven't been making payments because of one reason or another, you're totally free to do anything you want with that note. You can say, would you continue making the payments if I cut the interest rate from 5% down to 1%? Would that make it a trap? Is it hurting you any? You paid $1,000 for that $19,500 note. What difference does it make to you if it gets 10% or 1%? You're still, even if it paid zero, it's worth 20 times what you paid for it, right? Okay, so you had that flexibility. Could you cut the payments in half? Sure you could. If you cut the payments from $210 down to half to $105, you paid $1,000. At the end of 12 months, you've got more than your capital back. Anything they pay after that, your profit, correct? Okay? All right, so you can do anything you want, and I'll give you some examples of what you can do with that later on. Now, here's the most important thing. We've talked often about how you have to learn how to negotiate with the seller of the property, right? And you have techniques that we teach you over and over again. The most important thing here is you negotiate with the person who's making the payments first. You don't even care what that person who's selling it wants for the note. You're going to go and talk to the person who's going to be paying you money, and that's the person you're going to negotiate with. So first of all, you have to get from the note holder their perspective on what happened with the note. The one I gave you, this guy's never paid me for 2 years, never made a single payment on it. And I don't know what's wrong with it. Actually, it was a gal. Okay, and you get a copy of the note, so you get the document, so you know what it is that you're negotiating with. Second thing you do then is find out why the note payer's not paying the note. So I'll go back to this note. I've seen this a few times. Here's the reason why she wasn't paying the notes. She didn't know she was supposed to. Okay? I see it sometimes because it's kind of a weird transaction, okay? They got this note, they're supposed to come up with a down payment, and they didn't, and so the seller helped them out, and this guy was a wheeler-dealer type guy, so I'm sure he did some fast talking just to get her to move in and get the $50,000. He probably only had $10,000 or $15,000 into it, so he made a bundle of money with a $50,000 first mortgage, right? And then he must have not been very organized, which a lot of note holders are not, and so he never even sent her a note saying, "Where's my payment?" It just didn't come in. He went on to the next deal and all that stuff. So I talked to her about it, and she said, "Well, I know there was something going on there, but I just didn't make the payment because I didn't know I had to, I didn't know what that was all about." So I had to sit down and talk to her very politely and explain to her, pulled out the paper, said, "Here's the house that you bought. Remember, you paid $69,900. You got a loan for $50,000. You're making payments on that now, aren't you?" "Yeah, I'm making payments on that." "Where's this other $19,500? Well, you haven't paid it yet." Okay? All right, so we have to find out why she wanted it, why they were not paying the money, the payments on the note. And in doing this, you're going to be explaining to them that they have a note that perhaps they could lose their house over, right? Okay? So you could actually foreclose, and then they lose their house. And make sure that the note holder understands, though, that you really, really do not want to foreclose. That's not your objective. So don't ever go in threatening somebody with, "If you don't catch up on these payments on this note, I'm going to take your house." I don't see how that would be good to do. Just personally, I don't see how it'd be good to do. Financially, you're not going to make much money doing that, okay? Because then you're going to foreclose on houses that often are overfinanced anyway. You're going to end up with an alligator if you foreclose, usually, okay? All right. Make sure that the note holder then understands that you're really trying to help them out on a situation that they've got behind on. And then you create a catch-up plan for them. What could the catch-up plan? Well, it's what I've been mentioning to you. You could, for instance, add all the unpaid payments onto the back of the note. It'll fantastically increase your yield if you do that. Okay? To them, it's great. "Oh, I owe 2 years of payments, and you're not even going to make me pay them. I can pay them instead 15 years down the road. Fabulous. You're the nicest guy there is." That makes your note worth more money, okay? So you haven't hurt yourself at all by forgiving those payments. You could also, if you wanted to, just say, "Forget all the back payments. You owe me $19,500. Let's start making the payments from now on, and I'll forgive all those payments." And if I were making that as my negotiating strategy, I say $210 times 2 years comes out to be about $5,000. I'm going to forgive $5,000 off your note, okay? You could actually reduce the amount of the payments instead, cut them down to $105. You could reduce the face value of the note. You could say, "If you start paying on time right now, I'm going to reduce that $19,500 to only $19,500 to only $10,000. But you can't ever be late, because if you do, the balance goes back up to $19,500. Okay? You can do anything, like I said before. You can negotiate whatever fits them. Find out what they need, why they're not making the payments, and then see what you can do. I've structured where, okay, I see you've got a problem because you're not working, you're out of work, so I want you to instead pay me $10 a month for the next 6 months, just so you don't get out of the habit of making payments, and then your payments are going to go up to the rest. Okay? So you can do anything that fits their situation. Okay? I think I covered this. Reduce the amount of the payments for a period of time. That's what I just talked about. If right now it's temporary, and a lot of these are temporary, lost my job, but my wife's got her job, I just need to get some more training and I'm going to go to school for a year. Okay, let's pay half the payment for the next year. And then when you graduate, we'll raise on up to the next side. Here's an important thing. When you get to changing the note, do not write a new note. Keep that note exactly as it is and make an amendment on it. The attorneys will call it an allonge. And so you just ask them to do that the first time once you see one's done. In fact, go to LegalZoom.com and find one on there and write it yourself. And then it's an amendment. It's an additional page to the note. Okay? You don't change that note. And I'll get into the more reasons why this later on. But if you write a note, it begins what's called seasoning. Nate mentioned seasoning. And by the way, I do recognize that Nate's more handsome than I am. But I have many more ties than Nate does. And my ties look nicer than his. Okay, so you amend the note because it loses its seasoning. And as you have seasoning, your note becomes valuable to other people, other investors. So after it has a number of payments on it, it becomes worth more and more. If it gets over a year, it actually becomes something you can sell. Okay, so you don't rewrite it, you amend it. Because if you amend it and it's been unpaid for 2 years and now you get 1 more year of payments on it, it actually has 3 years of seasoning on it. Okay? Because it was from 3 years ago. So it's critical that you keep that note. Don't rewrite the note when you do these kind of fancy things. Okay, here's the third point. You're not going to foreclose. I referred to this before. I guess it could happen. I think I did this one time, but it's only because I couldn't find the guy. It took me 6 months. He wasn't there, wasn't in the house. I don't know if he left the country or went to jail or whatever, but he wasn't there. So I think that's the only time I ever remember going through a process of actually foreclosing. And of course, it was an okay deal. I think it was the second of $20,000, and the first I think was about $40,000. So that's okay for me to spend twice what my investment is to get it out. That was okay for me. I had the money at the time. If I didn't have the money, I would have just let it go. We'll cover that in the downsides in a minute. Okay, so we're not normally going to foreclose. It's not cost effective to foreclose, and you might have to buy the underlying first also. But always remember this, even though you and I know we'll probably never foreclose, who is that, Ben Franklin? Who said, speak softly but carry a big stick? No, it's World War II. That's right, yeah, Roosevelt, yeah. Speak softly, carry a big stick. How do you speak softly? I really do not want to foreclose on your house. Is there some way that we can work this out? Speaking softly. I'm not going to I'm being as soft as I can, but yet, by saying I'm not going to foreclose, I don't want to foreclose on your house, that raised a red flag in the back of their mind that I better get serious about this. I better find some way to work out of this because this guy can take my house. Okay? So speak softly, be polite, say, I don't want to do this. How can we work this out? And you got all the flexibility there is to work it out. Okay, now let's talk about the due diligence on a note. Now, we all know when we're doing really fancy real estate deals, there's a lot of stuff we have to look at, a lot of things we have to do. Due diligence on this note is basically that conversation with the note payer. That's fundamentally it. You talk to the note payer, you primarily find out why they're not making the payment. If they say, I'm not making that payment, I'm never going to make that payment, the guy who sold me the house told me that he's going to put new heating and air conditioning in here, and until he does that, I'm not going to make payments. I'm not going to buy that note. Okay? He's got a valid case. He's not going to pay me either, right? Okay? So if they're a real flaky person, you can't find them. They don't have a job. They don't have a checking account. I'm not going to buy that note. Okay? So that conversation is exceptionally critical. That's your due diligence because you're not going to, that's the character of the payer. Okay? You could do a credit check if you want to, but what the heck is the worth of it anyway? I mean, if they were in this situation, they probably didn't have the neatest credit in the first place, okay? All we're trying to find out is, do they understand they owe the money, and are they going to try make their best attempt to pay the money to me? Because I'm going to make the terms possible for them to make the payments if I know they want to, okay? Credit scores are not going to do us any good. There's not going to be any equity in most of these properties. I mean, you know, if you bought a house for $100,000, got an $80,000 loan, and carried back a second of $20,000, where's the equity? You know, so there's no collateral there really, especially right now when the houses have gone down. I think every property that I own is worth less than the loan right now. That's probably because I always pull loans out against them. But it hadn't hurt my rental income, by the way. Rent has gone up, so I'm not hurt unless I wanted to sell those properties. So there's no equity in most of the properties that I have right now, but my income's still coming in. The tenants don't say, oh, your equity went down, so I'm going to reduce my payment by 10%, you know. Okay, so you're not going to, equity is not your collateral. There's not going to be any seasoning on these notes, at least nothing you want to brag about. You know, they don't have on-time payment. Seasoning in our industry means 12 months of on-time payments. That's what we call a seasoned note. Anything less than that is non-performing. Okay? All right? Also very important, aside from your gut feel about this guy is telling me he's going to make the payments, you got to figure out that he's got the capacity to make the payment. So you are going to investigate his employer. I call up the employers and make sure that they haven't misrepresented to me that they did work there or how long they worked there. They're not going to tell you anything other than they've worked there and how long they've worked there. So I like to know that they've been on the job for more than a year, and also find out if they have other sources of income. You'll find people who somebody in the house has Social Security or disability of some type coming in. Maybe they have a side business. Anything like that goes to giving me more comfort level of, do I actually want to pay out that $1,000 for this $19,500 note? And then they have to have a bank account. I learned this a long time ago when I was doing those wrapping the lease options. If they didn't have a bank account, I didn't get my payments very, very regularly. And nowadays, what can you do if somebody has a bank account? You can have an automatic payment coming out, right? You do that if you own rental properties, right? It's the only way to do it, I think. So it automatically comes out. And if they don't have a bank account, I can't do that. I'm just not going to buy the note. I don't care what the price is. I'm not going to buy it if I can't get my capital back. I got to have my capital first. And if I don't have any comfort level that I'm going to get that back, I just go on to the next deal. Okay? And they must agree to this automatic drafts. I don't want the checks in the mail stuff. I lived through that a long time ago, and it's not happening anymore. Okay? And here's the neatest part about it. You're negotiating with a person. You're saying, okay, I'm going to try to make this work for you. I can lower your payments down to $105, but I'm in a really shaky position here. You owe me $19,500, and you've only been on your job for a year and a half, and you've already proven that you're late sometimes. I need some additional assurance that you're going to make these payments. What can we do for that? A lot of times I get their cards. Often a piece of junk, but at least it shows their sincerity, you know? Okay? It's not always a piece of junk either, but it usually has a big loan on it, so what am I going to do? Again, I'm not going to take it back. I'm setting up a psychological framework within their mind about, this is serious, I got to make these payments or bad things are going to happen. This guy's nice, but I can see he can take my house, okay? A boat, yeah. I did one of these last year, big screen TV. His family had a 50-some inch or whatever, that huge thing there. Most expensive piece of furniture they had, but they didn't want to lose their house. And by golly, they said, if we put this up, you know, would that feel okay about, you know, not foreclosing on it? So good enough. I'm just looking for their sincerity or other real estate. Once in a while, I get to make this second mortgage on this house be cross-collateralized against another piece of real estate also. It's kind of nice. It's usually not a really great piece of real estate, you know, an old vacant lot or something like this. But doesn't it give me a better feeling of security? Doesn't it make that person who's going to be making me payments really serious, right? Okay. So it's always nice to tuck something else in there. What's the costs now on a note? Okay, would you do a title search on a note like this? I kind of do it because I like to do them. But what difference does it make to me if this is actually a third position note or a fifth position note? I've never done a fifth, but I've done some thirds sometimes. So I don't have to do that. What's it going to do for me? I mean, if it goes bad, it's going to be because that person that I analyzed and thought, I got a good enough deal with this, I'm going to buy it. It's because of him, not because there's some cloud on the title. I've had people pay me on those notes after they moved away from the house. They shouldn't have. They just keep on paying me. I've had people pay me, well, I'll get in that a little bit later. It's really funny that happens sometimes. Do I need to do an appraisal on the property? What do I care what it's worth? Am I going to foreclose? Yeah, if I was buying legitimate performing notes, that'd be very important to me, because if the payments aren't made, I'm going to take the property, right? I already told you, this is not that kind of an investment. Okay? That's why we got to buy them very, very inexpensively. Okay? No escrow. I think probably the first time you do one, you go through an escrow, but it's so simple. I mean, we're just buying the note. There's nothing to it. There's no insurance. You're not getting title insurance for it. You're not doing escrows. All of that stuff is just a piece of paper that you're buying, and you're making a judgment. Will that person pay you at least to get your capital back? And we talked about no credit check either, so that's not a cost. So what in the heck is a cost in buying a note? It's my time. That's about it. There's nothing else I pay, you know.
What do you do with this note once you have it? First thing you can do with these notes is you want to add them to your balance sheet. In other words, you as an investor have cash. Say you got $5,000 and you bought this $10,000 note. You had cash on your balance sheet in your bank at $5,000. You go out and buy this note, and you buy it for, if it was a delinquent one, you might have bought it for only $1,000. But let's say you paid $5,000 for it. Now you put that on your balance sheet, and now you just have a $10,000 asset. In place of the $5,000 in cash, you have a note now that has a payoff on it of $10,000, and you just increase the value of your balance sheet, of your net worth. And why would you want to do this? Because over time, nobody has all the money they need, and as you keep on putting this in your balance sheet, eventually you're going to be doubling and tripling and quadrupling the cash that you had with the face value of a note, and all this represents cash flow coming in. And so at some point, you're going to start borrowing money from the bank, and now you can borrow money from the bank for maybe 5, 6, 7%, and turn around and buy these notes with that borrowed money, and the payments on the notes are going to more than pay the payments on the loan that you're getting. And so you're turning a cash asset into a note asset, which is worth far more than the cash, and that will allow you to, down the road, as you have several of these on your balance sheet, your banker becomes confident in you. They look at your assets and your net worth there, and that you've got a bunch of notes there, and now they're feeling pretty comfortable about loaning you money to buy these notes. Now, they're not going to loan you $10,000 to buy a $10,000 note, but if you're paying $5,000 for the note, your banks will be very comfortable giving you $5,000 to buy an asset that's worth $10,000 when you can show them on your book that you've already done this multiple times in the past. So that's the first thing you do with these notes, is you turn them into an asset worth whatever the payoff on that note is. And so if it's the payoff on it, if it got paid off today, it'd be $10,000. That's what it goes on your balance sheet for, even though you paid only $1,000 or $2,000 for it. Now, there's another thing you can do with these notes, and you can use them, their payoff value, to trade for something else. For instance, you could trade a note for real estate. Somebody else has a real estate that's not selling. They might be interested in getting a note from you that's going to generate for them monthly income for as long as the note is. You could even use it as the down payment or part of the down payment for a bigger piece of real estate that is worth a lot more than what your note is. You have a $20,000 note that you bought for maybe $2,000. You have that thing so it's performing down the road, maybe 6 months to a year down the road. You're in a position now where someone else trying to sell a property and can't get it moved, and rather than carry back the financing themselves, as you learned in some of the creative financing courses, you can actually offer them what apparently is a $20,000 down payment in the form of payments coming in for the next 5, 6, 10 years. One more thing about the trade value of these notes, too, that I might bring up is you could trade it for almost anything. One of the first notes I ever traded was to a small yacht. We lived in San Diego at that time. Not a yacht. That's not the right word. It's a sailboat anyway, 28 feet long. See, so you could trade it for a car or a four-wheeler or, you know, a piece of land or a mobile home or a motor home, who knows what. I mean, it is a value.
So now let's talk about how much you pay for a non-performing note. Remember, this is a piece of garbage, okay? It's not worth anything, you know. So first of all, one rule of thumb that I hope you try to abide by, and I know everybody will break it, I probably broke it when I first started, and that is never pay more than 5% of your capital for any one investment, okay? So that means if I'm only going to buy a notes for $1,000, then I got to have 20 grand, right? I think that I'm thinking portfolio-wise. That's the way I think. I told you this is not my tool belt, my toolkit. This is my tool shed, okay? And so I'm thinking portfolios. So don't ever put more than 5% of the capital that you have to invest in a single note. But here's an easier one to follow too. Price your notes so that you will get back everything you put into it in the first 12 months. Okay, on the note I talked about, $210 worth of payments. If I negotiate it down to $105, that would be okay. 105 times 12 is $1,260. I paid $1,000, I'm okay. Now, do I always get that? No, I don't. But I'll tell you, I've never paid more than 2 years worth of payments for a note. Whatever the next 2 years are, that's the max I pay. I think I probably average in the range of 12 to 15 months, just a bit above a year, and that's what I pay. I'm just not going to pay more. The guy says, well, this is a better note than that. If it's a better note, then it's not for me because that's not a non-performing. You need to go to some other investor to buy it, sell it. Because I only buy really bad notes. And that's why they're only worth 1 year's worth of payments.
We talked about paying 12 months for a note, the next 12 months worth of payments. The reason I like to use that strategy is because we've got a non-performing note, and I can scratch my head while I'm talking to this person and say, gosh, you know, this thing has no money coming in at all. Just trying to justify how I would pay for this thing. And then I'll pose a hypothetical question to the seller, and I'll say, do you think any payments will ever come in on this? You know, of course, they'll say, oh, sure, I'm sure some payments will. You know, I don't know if he'll pay them all, but I'll say, gosh, do you think he'd even pay 12 payments? You know, and then I'll play along with that. I'll say, if I give you money for this and I don't even get 12 payments, you know, I just lost out a lot of money. And that's the way I try to get the seller of the note to understand that he's got a real fixer-upper note there that needs a lot of work done on it. And so I'll offer like 12 months or 14 months, or really, if it's really a decent note, maybe I'll give 18 months or perhaps 24 months. But I'm talking about a strategy of using that as a way to price the note is, how many payments do you think I could really get this guy who hasn't been making payments or is late all the time? How many payments can I get him to pay me? And once I get him paid me that may, I've only broken even.
Okay. All right. How do you find them? I have to admit I have a bit of an advantage in this because my background being in accounting, I just let all the accountants and attorneys that I knew that I wanted bad notes. And so it was easier for me because that's the crowd that I ran in. But it's not too hard to get into that crowd if you just say, if your clients ever have a really bad note, give me a call and leave a business card with them. Doesn't happen too often, but when it does, there's nobody else to go to. How many people you think are out there going around saying, hey, I want to buy any bad notes that you have? Doesn't happen, not when they're second position notes like this. So accountants and attorneys, I think, are a good source. Keep in mind that's comfortable for me. If it's not for you, let's look at some other ways. Bankers. Bankers will have clients who have sold a house, carried back a note, they took it to the banker and said, well, this is what it looks like. Is it okay? Banker said, oh, yeah, I guess that's okay. You know, and now they start getting the payments and they don't get them. And the little lady comes in and tells the banker, they're not paying me anymore. They're not doing anything. That banker, to help out their own person, their own client there, will say, well, I know this guy that likes to buy bad notes. Why don't you give him a call? So bankers will on occasion refer to you only because they're trying to help out one of their own customers. Real estate agents, this is a source of notes besides referrals. Of course, they'll know who carried back notes, right? But also, Andy, have you ever heard of a real estate agent carrying back his commission on a note on those big commercial deals? Okay. Real estate agents carry back their their commissions they'll get a bit of it. You know, they got a $20,000 commission coming back, maybe to get $3,000 out of escrow. There, the $17,000 going to come to them on payments. Why? Because the seller of the property carried back a note, and the seller didn't get all their cash, and so they're saying, well, heck, Mr. Real Estate Agent, I didn't get all the cash that you promised me I'd get. I'm getting half of it in payments, so you're only going to get half of your commission. The rest of it's going to come back in payments, just like I'm getting my profit in payments. So real estate agents will sometimes have these notes. Especially in this economy, they'll do anything to make a deal, and so that may be what they're forced into. Nice notes there, okay? On the internet, I think you could do this. There are a few websites that actually deal in a marketplace of buyers and sellers of notes. The one that I know that's most reputable to me is called noteworthyusa.com, okay? It's got a little bulletin board. People post notes and buy notes back and forth. So you can find notes there, and you can post your note there if you wanted to sell it, but you can find people trying to sell them also. Okay? There may be some other ways. I have a web page in which I advertise for people to sell me their notes. I think I might get something off of there once a year. So I don't know, maybe I need to learn some more about search engine optimization or something. But so I do that. So we get a deal off there once in a while. County recorder's offices, go there. Nate was talking about searching the recorder's offices for some of the things that he was doing. You can go in there and find second mortgages in there, depending on the county. Sometimes they even define them clearly as a second mortgage, second TD or second mortgage, whatever it is. Counties differ, but in some county recorder's offices, it's very easy to find a whole list of second mortgages. I've done this when I lived in California. And I used to do it in San Bernardino and Riverside counties. Of course, that was before computers and everything, so it was my wife that actually did the work. She'd go down and scramble through and find all these second mortgages, and then we'd send out a postcard to whoever the billing address was for taxes, and just say, if you have a bad performing note, if your payments aren't coming in, give me a call. I like to buy that kind of a note. So we used to get them off of that. That's direct mail. Mobile home parks. We have one of our coaches. If any of you ever talked to Dawn Erling, have any of you ever talked to her when you were getting coached? Okay. Dawn is a specialist in mobile home notes. So she will buy mobile homes and turn around and sell them and carry back a note. So she's carrying a note there. A lot of people who are in a mobile home park will have to sell their note and finance it themselves. That's a carryback note. Why do they have to finance it themselves? Well, because does this 10 mean 10 seconds or 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay, good enough. We're moving along. We're just about there. Good. Okay. So mobile home people who sell their mobile home, it's very difficult to get financing on a used mobile home. They get a few $1,000s down, carry that note. It's a great little note to have. Again, if you have the conversation with the person living in the mobile home, get secure in your own mind that yes, they have the capacity to pay it, and yes, they do agree they own it. Then you get it. And then classified ads. I have done classified ads a long time ago, and it worked okay. I don't do them now because at some phase it didn't work anymore. Okay? And I don't know why. It might work now. By the way, it was in the same papers that Nate was talking about, those little thrifty nickel and that kind of stuff. Okay. I'm going to talk about some real fun things now, how you buy this note. First thing we talked about was a traditional purchase. Okay? This is buying at a discount. That's the same way we do real estate, right? We buy it at less than it's worth. Okay? So then we're going to talk about an amortized purchase of the note. We're going to talk about how to actually make a loan against the note instead of buying it. Then we're going to talk about buying a piece of the note instead of the whole thing. And then we're going to talk about buying it so you can sell it to the person that's supposed to make you payments. I'll show you how to do that. And then we're going to talk about buying it, fixing it up. At the end of a year, it's seasoned, payments have been on time, and then selling it to a traditional investor. Okay? All right, traditional purchase. That's what I've been talking about here so far, although I didn't give you the whole story on this one. I will in a minute. 19,005 face value notes, 15-year note, 10% interest rate, payments about $210, okay? And so, and let's say that you purchase it for 18 times the monthly payments. And you also negotiated the payments down to be $105. So you bought it from him for 18 of the 105 because you told the seller, this note's only worth $105 a month. You said it was worth $210, but no payments have ever come in. It's worth $105 a month is all I can get out of the note pair. I'll give you, in this case, it would be $1,890 for your note. Remember, I got it for $1,000 anyway, but if I was negotiating it, that's what I get. So if you receive then the monthly payments of $105 that you renegotiated, you now have $1,260 for the year for the $1,890 that you paid for it, 67% return on your note. What if the person, after 2 years, stopped paying on it? You still made 29% on your money. Is that bad? Okay. So he said these things are so good if you're looking at non-performing notes, because that's the ones you can get at this price. Amortizing the purchase of the note. Okay, so the guy says, I won't sell this for anything less than $5,000. That's it. I got to have $5,000 or I'm not selling it. Okay, and so that's what it comes down to. I might do a note at 25%. I can't recall that I've ever gone that high, but I could possibly. And that'd be about a 25% purchase. So finally you say, okay, if you need to have the $5,000, I'll work this out for you. I'll give you the $5,000 over the next 12 months. Now then I'm going to pay you equal payments of $416.67. I'm getting in $105, right? So really I'm out of pocket for 12 months. I'm out of pocket $301 approximately, okay? So I'm paying that amount for the note. I'm not actually paying this whole $3,612 because it's over a period of time, right? So, but at the end of 12 months, I got 14 months left on that note, and that is a 35% return on my money that I only had to come with at $300 a month for 1 year. And now I got this money coming in for 14 more years. Still a really, really good buy. It doesn't make you as much as if you get him to cash out right up front, okay? But still, that's a way when you have, he wants much more than it's worth to you. That's a way to work through being able to pay him more and yet have the note pay you part of it. You can also make it a loan against the note. Now, what I just talked about there, we talked about discounting the note, and that what I just talked about is almost like trying to figure a real estate strategy for that. It's almost like a lease wrap, wouldn't you say? Got one payment coming out and a different kind of payment going in, okay? So it's a little bit of a variation on that. This one here, there is no equivalent to this in real estate that I can think of. Probably if we all thought for a minute, we might figure it out. But you'd only do this on a performing note. So as you look for bad notes all the time, you're going to come across performing notes sometimes. And if the person needs money, you can't get it at a huge discount because it's a decent note. So you're not going to sell it at 90% off. But you can still make money off of it this way, okay? It's a performing note. Seller needs to have $5,000 now, okay? So you give him $5,000 and say, I'll loan you $5,000 in return for you assigning the note to me, and I get the payments until you give me back my $5,000, okay? So it sounds like, how am I going to make money off of that? You're not going to get your capital back necessarily if he pays you for 1 year and then gives you back the $5,000. I guarantee you they don't do it that way, though. He's going to give you the $5,000. You're going to give him the $5,000. And the funny thing is, if you work through, if you have your little financial calculator, if you work through the procedure there on what those payments are worth, you're actually going to end up getting usually about 50% on your money when we look at an APR. And how does that work out? Well, let's go back to that note, $210 a month approximately. You gave out $5,000, okay? Now you're going to get payments of $210 a month, and let's say he keeps it for 12 months. By the way, you could say you have to keep it for 12 months if you want, so he can't cash out after 1 month. But the APR is still the same no matter when he cashes out. And so you got 210 times 12 is $2,520. Is that what it is? Okay, so you have that coming in. Is that about half of your $5,000? Okay, so you got half of it. Then he pays you your $5,000 back, so you just made 50% on your money. It comes out the same. It's always 50% return on your money going down, no matter how long he keeps it. Even if he kept it for only 6 months, and so he only got $1,250. On an APR, that's still 50% of your money, right? 50% return. If you did it again the next 6 months, you'd still get 50%. Okay, so that's kind of a twist on it, and I like to do that once in a while. If it's a nice performing note, and it's not the type of thing that's going to get a huge discount. Okay. Also, you can buy a part of the note. It's kind of fun. Again, usually you'll do this on a performing note. So these are strategies that if you market for this, you will come across notes that cannot be discounted 90%. They're okay notes. Okay, so this is a way you can buy them without discounting them heavily. Find out how much the seller needs and find out the note holder, the one that's receiving the payments, find out what they want to use the money for. This is just conversation, so you can get a feel about what they're trying to do. And then as you work through that, you offer them, again, here's my 5 for 6, okay? So the person needs to have $1,000, and their payments coming in are, what did we say? They were $210 approximately. And so you're going to then pay out $1,000, $1,047.74, but you're going to collect 6 payments. So you're going to get $1,200 in, see? So you just say, okay, you only need $1,000, I'll buy 6 months of your loan. You give me payments for 6 months, it's signed to me, I get the payments. At the end of 6 months, the note automatically goes back to you. Is that making sense? Because that one gets a little bit more complicated, but you're only buying a piece. That's all you're doing. Find out how much they want, work through that formula of I'm going to buy 6 months and I'm going to pay you 5 months for it. If they want 12 months, I'm going to pay you 12 months. I'm going to pay you 10 months and I'm going to receive 12 months. Make sense? 5 or 6. Just an easy formula. Doesn't sound too much to the seller. You obviously could use any formula you want, but that works good for me. And then you get the 6 months, APR 66% in that case. All right. Note payer purchases his own note. I got to finish this one off. So I told you about that note. I had a sense to buy it for $1,000. I have my conversation like we talked about with the note payer. Flew down there, tax deductible trip, of course, because I'm on business trip, right? Went out to lunch with them at some kind of a medium price little restaurant. Talked to them. So what I find out is when she bought it, she was single. Now she's married. Okay, she has made a significant improvement in her salary. Her new husband has a salary. Okay. On the way there, by the way, I stopped by the Beneficial Finance. I stopped by the Wells Fargo Finance, Citi Finance, not Citibank, not Wells Fargo Bank. Picked up the business card of the manager. Okay. I go by them. I said, okay, look, I see what you got going here. I'll tell you what I'll do with you on this note. This is a $19,500 note. If you will give me $5,000 note, $5,000, I'll tear the note up. They said, we don't have $5,000. How could we possibly get $5,000? They didn't have the money to put down when they bought the house, right? I said, no problem. Go look at one of these 3 guys. I don't know if you know this, but Beneficial Finance will loan anybody with a house, even if you don't have a job, $5,000. Okay? You may have gotten in the mail, here's a check here, come down and cash it. You don't need a credit check, you don't need anything. Okay? So I knew they could do that. I said, I'll tell you what, you go down and talk to them. If you want to, you can have this whole note of $19,000 torn up if you give me $5,000. By the way, I worked out the numbers. The payments on the 5-year note at 29%, which is what they charge, came out to be about $210 a month. So they pay $210 for 5 years, and they got rid of the note instead of for 15 years to me. Okay? So essentially, you can offer them to do this as soon as you buy the note. When you're in that interview, say, would you like to buy it from me? If they say yes, which they said, yeah, we'll try to do, then I call up the note holder and I tell them, I think I'll close on that note. Okay? All right? And so I buy the note from him, and about 7 days later, I get a check for $5,000. Okay? So that's flipping a note. So those of you guys who raised your hand who said, no, I don't want these cash flow things, I want the money now, watch out for these. That short conversation, you could be able to flip that note for $5,000, pretty easy $5,000. If they got decent credit, maybe even a lot more than that, okay? If you line up with the right investors, and they're all over the place, people who are getting money, just minimum amounts of money in their retirement plan or in the savings account, it's easy to get joint venture partners to help you to build up a portfolio of 50 or 100 or more. Right now I have 83 of them. I used to have well over 200, but then I had a son-in-law that needed to go to dental school. Got him out, and he bought his practice, and within 2 years he owned 3 dental practices. So because of that, I had a son go to dental school last year. I've got him going to dental school this year, and 2 sons-in-laws going to school a year after that. And they said, if he can do it, so can I. So now I've got all these obligations I'm looking at, but they pay back good. I mean, it's good because my daughters are married to those sons-in-law, see? So that's my grandkids I'm looking at there, okay? So anyway, the strategy that you use for getting, oh, by the way, where I was going with that is, so at one time I had over a couple of hundred of these notes. I learned this strategy from a fellow who had 300 notes. And that was many, many years ago. About 2 or 3 years ago, he passed away. An associate of mine, somebody I'd been in partnership with in an accounting firm, ended up doing the appraisals of those notes. We talked earlier about the probate, so everything has to be evaluated. And so she got the appraisal on those notes. I talked to her about 6 months after he passed away, and she told me he had 900 notes at that time. You know, so there are people out there that have huge amounts of these notes, and I don't even know what the pay on those were, what the rate of return on them, so I don't know what his monthly income was, but you know, it had to be somewhere as close to $1 million a month coming out for those, okay? So at any rate, it's not just a little tiny thing, but it took time, you know, it took time. Okay, so and there's very small investments per note if you want to work with some other investors. There's very fast return on their capital. Capital means they put out the money and they got back what they put out. Now that's not a return on their capital yet, but they'll get the return over time. So I can show you how to structure these so that you can make sure that the investor gets back his capital fairly quickly. So that's nice. You also find that if you want to do this, you can be the person who finds the notes and manages the portfolio, and then the investor just puts up the money. And they just love it. They just love it. You know, because you say, okay, I got another $7,500 I need here, another $3,500 I need here. They just put it up because they're getting their capital back fairly quickly, and they're getting a huge return on them. When you work that kind of a portfolio, and I don't do that myself, but I have a number of acquaintances, and that's the only way they work their business. They're promising their investors to have anywhere between the range of 20 to 40% return per year, okay? Because you get them at such a discount. You know, even though the note's written for 10%, if you didn't buy it at full face value, if you bought it at 1/4 of it, all of a sudden your 10% becomes 40% of the 1/4, right? So it works very well. Easy to get investors. And when you have enough notes, when you have a portfolio, you can actually guarantee this investor that he will be able to get his capital back as quickly as you want to do. Because even if the payments start getting staggered and late and whatever, you've got these other notes, so you can guarantee this investor that you'll make sure he gets his capital back, because you have the working capital to do that. And then that makes it even safer for the investor. And by the way, if you do that, be a bit cautious, because you want to talk to an attorney about it, because there's ways you can do that where you're actually breaking the law if you're guaranteeing a return, right? So there's ways to do it you don't. I won't go into the details on that, but you can set up a portfolio where your investors know what they're getting all the time. Okay, and then you can use notes as down payments on real estate. Okay, as a matter of fact, I used a real estate note to buy that 1/6 of that 28-foot sailboat that I bought many years ago. I traded a note for 1/6 of it. So I gave him the note, and let me tell you how powerful this is. I'll cover it a little bit later too. If I had a $19,500 note, and I paid only $1,000 for it, and then I went and traded it somebody for, I think my share of that was $6,000 for my, this is a long time ago, so 28-foot boats are a lot cheaper than now. I think I paid $6,000, but the person who sold me that 1/6 felt like they got $19,500, right? It's the face value of the note. If it gets paid off in cash, like they sell a house or refinance, how much did the holder of that note get? $19,500. Doesn't make any difference what I paid for it, and yet I got 6 times the value of what I paid for it. That person that took the note from me, I don't even remember what size that note was, but anyway, if it paid off early, or if he went out and built a swimming pool and refinanced, and they took that note out to refinance it, he got chunked out at the face value of the note. Okay? And then finally, you can use it to increase your net worth. What does that mean? You bought this note for $1,000. The face value on it says $19,500, $210 a month coming in for the next 15 years. You show that to the banker, what's he going to say that note's worth? 19,500. It says there right on the face, you know. And so I'll show you how to make, and one of the further illustrations, I'll show you how to make that note be really strong, even though it's really bad right now, okay? So, but on the face value, it's 19.5. Would he give you the full value amount? Probably not, but he'll probably say, hey, that's worth 10,000. He thinks he's discounting it deeply, right? 50%, right? But you didn't pay that kind of money for it. You never pay 50% for a non-performing note, okay?
I wanted to ask, I am new to the real estate investment field, and I'm not familiar with a lot of attorneys and accountants and those sort of professionals in my community. And I guess I just wanted what you thought was the best avenue, or some tips on you know, what's the best way to talk to these other professionals that I'm just so newly working with. Would it be best to you know, I know that Matt Larson in Dean's book was talking about, you know, with working with real estate agents, you know, sending out emails and trying to find agents that'll work with you that way. Could I use a system similar to that when approaching these other professionals to maybe start, you know, getting some information, or, you know, how to approach them and ask?
I think that system has worked for me for so long, and, you know, as long as emails come out. Prior to that, it was letters. And it's worked so well for Matt and so many other students. I think it'd be great just to optimize your time. I know how busy everybody is in today's world, but, you know, Talmadge will have some other thoughts. But I'm always thinking on the marketing side of how to do less work to accomplish a lot more. Because if you craft one really good email, you know, there's a great saying that if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. Just always remember that, and everybody listening tonight, always remember that when you write something, because we're all so busy. None of us want a 5-page email or a 5-page letter. We just don't have the time to read it. You know, we're in a soundbite world. Mm-hmm. So what I would suggest, Sarah, is to take the time and craft an email based on, you know, watching Talmadge again from the EDGE event, listen to this call again, and craft, you know, as short as possible but concise email that basically says, I'm interested in buying non-performing and performing notes. I figured you'd be a great resource to maybe help one of your clients while I do what I want to do best. And if you'd like to, you know, if you have any, please, you know, call this 800 number, and maybe you send them to a pre-recorded message, or just put your cell phone in there. And an easy way to do it is to ask every single person you know who they use as an attorney, an accountant, or their real estate agent. And I'd bet to say, even though you don't think you know anybody, you know, like that whole 7 degrees of separation, mm-hmm. I bet you're only 1 degree of separation away from at least 10 of those. And then you could drop that person's name. You could call the office and say, you know, call the attorney's office and say, hi, I have a friend that uses your services. Her name's Lisa or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I offer a service that you guys might be interested in. What's the best email address to send you something that can help your clients and it costs you nothing? This is not a sales call. And I bet to say you'll get a good chunk of emails. You probably get 80% of the people get you an email address to someone who can make a decision. And then you can send this well-crafted email out explaining exactly what you're looking to do. And again, remember this. You can do all of this, and you can send out those emails, and you can get responses, and you don't have to do anything. So don't feel you have to be totally prepared or have tens of thousands of dollars ready to buy notes, or you need to know everything there is about notes. Just get your feet wet. You know, if you read my book, you know I'm more about action. You know, overanalysis can cause paralysis sometimes. So you could just do that, send out those emails, and start getting phone calls and get some practice in. And if you blow the first one, who cares? At least you're in the game.
I think that's the best piece of advice I could get, because I'm actually at that point right now where the almost paralysis has set in, to where I think I need to do something different.
Think about it. Just, you know, my analogy is, you know, just do it.
One thing about notes is when they've been seasoned, they become worth more. So you can sell a note. If you got a bad note and you turned it into a good performing note like we talked in the last class about, you can sell it sometimes after having only 6 months of seasoning. And then it becomes a sellable commodity, 6 months of untimed payments. You'll probably find, though, that you'll get a better purchase price on it if you wait a full year and have 12 months of on-time payments. Value. A note has a value, two kinds of values. One is how much you would get if the person making the payments cashed it out right now. They went and refinanced it and gave you a chunk of cash. That's the payoff on the note, and it changes every month as they pay more payments. It goes down a little bit, not as much as the payments, because most of the payment is interest. That's one value. And the other value is the fact that money will come in for a long period of time. Some of the notes that you'll see will actually have payments coming in for 30 years. So you can imagine that somebody might pay a nice chunk of money to get payments of $400 a month coming in for the next 30 years. So that has a great value, and you can use it to trade on just about anything that you can dream up if you've got a person who wants money for a long time and is willing to give up some money now to get a greater amount of money over a period of time. Okay, now then I'm going to go to another thing we can do with a note, and that is once you have the note, you're receiving a certain amount of payments. But since you're the owner of the note, you have perhaps some not power, but some persuasiveness that you can add to the note that might get the payments coming into you sooner. If you are familiar with and I won't go into details about this, the financial calculator, but financial calculators are something that you use to figure out what's the actual yield of the cash flow that's coming to you. If you get $100 a month coming in for a period of 12 months, that's going to be $1,200, but what is it worth today? Perhaps it's worth $1,000. And so you use these financial calculators to figure out how much a cash flow is worth. And even though they get kind of complicated, the fundamental rule of what's going on in figuring out your yield is the more money you get sooner, the more it's worth. And so if you have $100 a month coming in for 12 months, that's kind of nice. That's $1,200. But for most people, $1,000 right now would be worth more to them than $100 a month coming in for 12 months. So as you think through that perspective, understand that when you hold a note and someone that you've dealt with, that you bought the note and now you've talked to that note payer, you can talk to them on a regular basis and you can give them incentives to pay you your money quicker. The core of that philosophy is that the more money I get in quicker, the more money I have to go out and buy more notes that are going to make me 100% or 200%. And so there's a number of strategies you can use. Some of the people that I know have software packages actually when they send out the bill to their note payer every month. It has in it a little message that says something along the line of, I'll be glad to lower your interest rate from 12% down to only 6% if you're interested in increasing your payment by $50 a month. Okay, those are the types of things that will get your money to come in quicker. Let's see. Okay, so we would do these types of things to get the note payer to pay us back quicker to increase our yield. So we might reduce the amount that they owe in total if they pay it off early. We might reduce the interest rate on the monthly payments if they increase the amount of the monthly payments. For some people who hate being eaten up by interest, that sounds like a great deal. Another person who's making payments might be more interested in, we would reduce the interest rate if they would make, say, an extra large payment every 6 months or once a year. And we'd say, if you agree to make your normal monthly payments and then every 6 months pay me extra amount, I'll reduce the interest on your payment. So there's all kinds of parts to a note, too. If you think this through, you have the amount that's due to you right now. You have the amount that's the total that will come in over the full length of time that the payments are going to come in. So you multiply the payments times the number of months. You also have the interest rate that's buried in there. And you have the amount of the monthly payment. And you have the term of the note. So you can change any of those that would attract your note payer to want to pay more off. The investor would probably want to make 24% on his money. So if the interest rate on the note is 10%, for him to get 24%, he has to pay something less than the $18,000. If he paid the $18,000, then he'd be getting 10% on his money. But he wants 24%, so that means he'll buy that note for about $11,000. So he has a $19,000 note. He bought it for $11,000. He's going to get the remaining 10 years of payments. Now it's 9 years left of payments, and he'll make 24% on his money. Okay, he pulled out his financial calculator. That's how he came up with that $11,000. He says, my portfolio makes me 24%. If I'm going to buy your note, I got to have that make me 24%. So he gave you the $11,000 offer. Of course, you'll have calculated that up front. You know what he's going to be asking for anyway. Okay, now what did you get out of the deal? Well, you got 12 payments, which is about $3,000, plus you got $11,000 from the investors, so you got $14,000. You invested about $3,000, so you got back approximately 3.7 times what you put into the note. In other words, you put in $3,000, you got 3.7, which is the $14,000 that you got back. If you put that in a financial calculator, by the way, that comes out to be a 200% return on your money for 1 year. Now, you might say, well, if I got 3.7, that's 370%. How do you come up with 200% instead of 370%? Well, the reason is the financial calculator discounts the cash flow. Yeah, that is 3.7 times. So the financial calculator says, but you didn't get all that money as soon as you put it in. You had to wait for a year to get it all back. So that discounts it. That's why it comes out to be 200%.
And the only other question I had was just the investment multiple on this Excel spreadsheet of 3.7. What exactly was that?
Let's see. I put in the hypotheticals. I put in 3,000, and I got back 14,000, which is 11,000 the person gave me, the buyer of the note, plus the 3,000 a monthly payments that I had been receiving until I got ready to sell it. So that's 14,000 divided by 3,000.
Talmadge, is there a process that you go through on the mortgage calculator?
I'll do it very quickly, but basically what you do to figure this out is you put in a key that has a PV for present value. You put in the amount that you're going to pay for the note, and then you put in the amount of the payments in a key that says PMT, and then you put the amount of the term, how many payments are going to be, and then you have it calculate for the interest, that's INT key, and it'll come up and tell you if you paid this amount of money and you receive payments of this size and you receive X number of those payments, this is what your yield is for this factor. And those of us that like that will say, well, you know, in this economy, I want to make 24% on our money. And so we'll vary those until we get the one that makes 24%, and that'll tell us what we want to offer for it. But still, I think a rule of thumb, just divide it by what you have, divide what you invested into what you got back, and you get a good idea of how much you can make on these notes. And by the way, the reason that I like to pay 12 payments for my notes is that if I paid out 12 payments, that means I'm going to get back exactly how much I paid out in 1 year, right? I offered 12 payments, and 1 year I get back 12 payments. What does that come out to be? That means I'm getting 100% each year that I continue to hold the note, 100% on my money. Every year I get back the same amount of money I paid for it. And by the way, if you kept this note and you didn't sell it, you would eventually receive on that 10% note over 10 years $30,000 for the $3,000 that you paid for it.
Buy, fix, and sell, right? Here's buy, fix, and sell on the note version. All right? You buy the note, you talk to the person, get them to pay on time for 12 months. At the end of 12 months, we no longer have a non-performing note, do we? This makes it marketable to other kinds of investors. Has to have third-party verification, so when you go to sell this to somebody, you can say, here's the bank deposits, there was an automatic draft, here's the bank statement, you can see it was on time every month, month after month for 12 months. Okay, if the payer is late, the 12 months have to start all over again, and now you have a seasoned and performing note. How much do they sell for? If it's a second position note, investors will only pay 50% of that. If I bought the note for $1,000, it's a $19,000. I get payments for 1 year on time. It's going to be worth somewhere close to $10,000. If it's a first position note, investors will, in this economy, usually discount no more than 30%. A couple of years ago, they were discounting practically nothing, 1 or 2%. So it depends on the economy. Right now, 30% discount. Okay, so you get instead 70% of that. So you have $14,000 for that note you paid $1,000 for after you have it seasoned for a year. Who are you going to sell it to? Private investors. Again, the same people we work with in real estate. This is a nice, safe investment for some kinds of people. Okay, and institutional investors. There are some. You can get some names about from the internet. You can talk to Nate or myself or anybody. We have lists of people who will buy these kind of private institutional companies that will actually buy these, as many of them as you can ever have.
Okay, now I want to talk about a different subject on what you can do with a note, and that is you can sell the note. I just barely touched on that when we at the Edge seminar, but let me go into more details on this, because this will really allow you to make a lot of money if you can turn your money quicker. So first of all, you need to have somebody to sell the note to. Now, in the industry, there are people who have such a large amount of money that it's more than they can invest in the notes they find. So these are, I wouldn't say they're necessarily institutional people like a bank, but they're people with huge amounts of money, and they run a business that does nothing but buy notes wherever they can find them. And so they're fairly easy to find. You just go on Google and you want to check, just go in note broker or note buyers, mortgage note purchasers, and you'll come up with a number of them. You might want to check back with us once in a while. If you're looking at those, ask us if we've had any experience with that investor buying those notes, and we can tell you how credible they are. But there's a better way to do it than that, though, because these guys are in a business for this, and so they're going to make more money off that than another source. And this is the same source that you've learned about in Dean's courses already, and that is investors that are in your community. Investors that are in your community that are not real estate investors, or maybe do some real estate but are looking for an alternative place to put their money, such as their money that's in their retirement plans, might be very interested in buying an investment where they could make 12% or even 18%. Because you can take these notes and turn around and sell them at a higher price than you got them for and make money as if you were flipping the note. So you might have bought a note at a price where you were making a yield of 24%, and now you turn around and sell it at somebody else where they make what they think is a fabulous yield of 12% or 14%. And that means in order for that to happen, you sold it to them at a higher price. They paid more for the note than you did. That's why they have a smaller yield. But we get them at such fabulous yields. I mean, 24% is about the minimal we would buy a note at. And so we can certainly turn around and sell the note to someone else where they make a really nice yield on their investment, something they've never heard of, way more than the bank does, much more dependable than the stock market. And you had just taken a note that you bought, especially if it was a non-performing note, so you bought it incredibly cheap, and then you turn around and sell it at a normal price. Even if you bought the note at 50% discount, though, wouldn't someone else think it was a fabulous deal to buy a note at 25% discount, a $10,000 note that you got at $5,000? Certainly another more passive investor that doesn't know what you know would be very interested if you would bring them a note where they bought the $10,000 note for $7,500. If the face value on that note had been, if the face interest rate had been 10% and they bought it at 75%, that means they're probably making now something around about 14% on their money because they bought it at $7,500 instead of the full face value of $10,000.
But if they ever try to refinance that house, your second is on there, and that refinance company doesn't want to be in third position, do they? So they're going to say, okay, you got $50,000 equity in the property, and by the way, you owe $19,500, so we'll be glad to give you this $50,000 loan, but the $19,500 is going to come to me, and they're going to get the $30,500 on their side, right? That's the way it has to be done. Now that's why I had those payments, because you know what's going to happen? They're going to send me a notice asking me for the payoff on that note. In fact, it's going to say on there, this party owes you $19,500, and I have to sign off on it. And I'll send back, oh, I'm sorry, that's not quite correct. He hasn't paid on me for 24 months. The late pays and everything else and the interest makes it $24,000. Okay? And if I show that documentation, that finance company is going to have to pay me for that when they refinance for whatever they did. They're going to pay me the amount of all those interest and penalties. Okay, that's why you do that. Okay, so is that a downside? Yeah, I've gone for, I think I went for one time about 7 or 8 years with no payments. Okay, but when I got paid, it was a nice bonus, Okay, all right. And of course, you'll get paid when they sell the note. When they sell their house, you're a lien on there. So they didn't make you payments for all those years or months or whatever it is. A lot of times people stop paying me when they put their property up for sale. And so I may be 6, 8, 9 months of not getting payments. And I'll talk to them and say, well, I got it for sale. I'll pay when it gets sold. So I get that plus all the late payments and the interest charge. Okay? And here's the last downside. They stop paying on the underlying first. So this is somebody that's really in trouble. They stop paying on their underlying first. So what can you do in a second position? Show up at the auction and bid on the first, right? So that could be really painful. I don't think I've ever done that. I would just as soon lose my $1,000 and show up at the auction and waste my time trying to buy out that other note. And I think, to be honest with you, in approximately 35 years that I've been doing this, I think I've lost outright on that where the underlying first foreclosed and I didn't get my capital back probably in the range of a dozen times over that period of time. So maybe once every 3 years on average. Okay, so it just doesn't happen that I don't get my capital back. Now, did I get my whole $19,500? No, maybe I only got $3,000 off of my $1,000. So I'm talking about a dozen times I didn't get my $1,000 back. Okay? They got the money. Here's one thing. I send out payments to these. I have a little computer program, and every month, everybody that I'm receiving payments for, they get an offer to, I'll take $1,000 off your note if you'll pay me $500. Okay, I've got all my capital back. Doesn't make any difference what I do with the rest of that $18,500, right? I'll lower the interest rate on your note to 0 if you pay me $5,000. Whatever I can think up, it goes out to everybody every month. Okay, that will get me cash up front. Okay.
But let me give you some other strategies for selling it. You can, if you want to, sell only 50% or some percentage of the amount of the monthly payments. Let's say the monthly payments are coming in at $500 a month for the next 10 years. You kind of like to have that kind of money coming in. You're a cash flow type person, but you also need some cash right now. You don't have to sell off the whole payments for the next 10 years or whatever it is. You can sell somebody else, especially one of these private investors, half of the payments. So let's say the note's worth $10,000. Well, let's say you bought it for $2,000. You improved the note, and now it's going to be going, let's say it's worth $10,000, has a $10,000 payoff after the year's worth of payments. $500 a month coming in, another investor might be very interested in buying half of that payment. In other words, if you let him, you'll let him have $250 of the $500 payment. What might he pay for that? Well, it's a $10,000 coming in. Would he be really excited to pay you $5,000? Well, let's see. If it was $10,000, then half his share is $5,000. So he might be excited to pay you $2,500. That he's getting his share of the payments for 50% of the payoff value on it, $2,500. Does that kind of make sense? You sold him half of the note. The whole note's $10,000. Your half is $5,000. His half is $5,000, and you give it to him for $2,500. Now he gets to get $250 for the next, let's say it was 10 years, and you get $250 for the next 10 years. But also, you just got $2,500. And how much did you buy the note for? $2,000. Is that what I said? You just made $500 on the note, and you still have cash flow coming in for the next 10 years. So you can sell a piece of the monthly payments. You don't have to give it up if you don't want to. All right, let's get another variation of this. You can also sell part of the note, part of the payment stream. In other words, if you wanted to, you could sell just the next 12 months of this $500 a month coming in. So you got $500 a month coming in. Someone else really knows you, and they know you have good investments for them, and they're trying to get you to sell them some more investments. And you say, okay, I got $500 a month coming in on this note for the next 10 years. If you want, I'll give you the next 12 months of these payments in return for you giving me $5,000. $500 will bring you $6,000 for the year, so you'll be making 20% on your money. That sounds like a darn good investment to someone who's used to making 3 or 4 or 5% at the bank. And so what you did was you sold them the next 12 months, or maybe 24 or 36 or whatever you wanted, but somewheres down the road, you get to start receiving the payments again. How's that for a great way to pull up cash every once in a while when you need it, and yet not let go of this fabulous cash flow instruments? If you were looking at this buying of the note type thing, giving away some of the payments, I have, I think, in the range of about 35 or 38 notes that I had bought over the years, and they were 30-year notes. In other words, payments were going to be coming in for 30 years. And I sold off within a year or two after buying them. And I'm talking about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. I sold off the next 25 years of payments. This is called keeping the tail end of a note. And so I'm now, by the way, I'm at retirement age. I don't know if maybe not all of you saw me, but I just turned 66 yesterday. So yahoo, I get to have my Social Security payment coming in nowadays. At any rate, I have these tail ends of notes that are becoming mine now. And so over the next 5 to 10 years, I'm going to have these notes come back to me, and I'm going to be receiving the monthly payments that I sold the first 25 years of those payments to somebody else many years ago. And so that's called keeping the tail end of a note. So I'll just tell you quickly what a balloon is if you haven't heard the term before. A note might have payments that would amortize it out for, let's say, 30 years, but there's written in the contract that it's not going to actually go for 30 years. Even though the payments would pay it off at some point in the future, usually it's 5 years down the road, but it could be any period of time, the note has to be paid off. So if a person has a note like that, how do they pay it off all of a sudden? Well, they go out and refinance it, and they get a new loan on their house, and the new loan pays it off. So those are called balloons. So one more thing that you can do with a note is you could sell all the payments but keep the balloon at the very end. So at some point, especially when the balloon's out there 10 or 12 or 15 years, and you'll see them like that, you sell somebody all the payments, you're going to get a good chunk of money for the payments alone, and then you keep the balloon. That balloon is going to come in one big payment at some point down the road. Or the reverse of that is you could sell somebody else the balloon payment and keep the monthly payments for yourself for the next 5 or 10 or 12 years. And then they buy a big chunk of cash that's going to come to them somewheres down the road. And I just want to run through a sample, this scenario that I'm talking about. And this is talking about a note with the express purpose of selling it when it'll go for a good price. And so we'll assume for this case that's 1 year down the road. It has 12 months worth of seasoning. So let me put out some numbers for you and show you how this works out. Let's say we find a note that's worth $19,000. I think let's use the example of the one that I said back on Edge. I think it was a $19,000 note, and it had not received any payments for 2 years, if you remember. So I got that at a really good discount. I think I paid $1,000 for it. And, yeah, that's what I paid for it because the guy told me if you take this off my hands for $1,000, you can have whatever it's worth. So let's say we got a $19,000 note. It's a 10-year note, 10% interest. That would make the payments be about a little bit over $250 a month. Let's say you follow the classic strategy of presenting to the seller of the note, the person who has it, the next 12 months worth of payments. I always like, even though I love the financial calculator, analytical, I love to play around with it, but rules of thumb work a lot better, I think, especially when you're negotiating. So
Talmadge, is it my understanding that the notes need to season? Is there a seasoning period of, like you said, 6 to 12 months? And also, do you have to bring the non-performing notes to performing once you try and sell it to other investors?
Okay, good questions. The seasoning of this, now keep in mind, Dean brought up that there's certainly a lot of notes out there that are paying just fine, but somebody doesn't want them, so they already have seasoning on them. So you could turn around and sell those the same day that you bought them.
Okay, great.
All right. Now then, on the other part had to do with the
non-performing note.
Yeah. So, yeah, can you sell them when they're still non-performing? You probably could. It would be very hard to find an investor for it, and you wouldn't get much for them because they're not performing. So it's kind of like, could you buy a fixer-upper property and turn around and sell it without fixing it up? Yeah, you can. You'd have to find somebody who knows how to fix them up, right?
Right.
And then that builder type, handyman type would buy it from you, but you wouldn't make much money off it because he has to put a lot of effort and money in it to make it fixed up and then sell it or rent it, whatever he's going to do. So yeah, you could do it, but that's well, it's the same thing. You wouldn't make much money off of it. If you wanted to hold on to it and use the techniques like we talked about there at Dean's Edge workshop, if you did those things and got the person to, even if you changed the note so that it was affordable for the person so they could make the payments on time, and the payments are smaller now than they were originally, but you can still sell that smaller note to somebody else who has smaller amounts to invest.
Where would someone go? Where is a good place that you found to sell a note?
Basically,
how do you find buyers?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I do, but I'll tell you some other things that I haven't done, but I've had students do. All of my contacts have come from attorneys, accountants, and very experienced real estate agents, those who know who have the money for real estate. So these kinds of people not only know about investors, but they know about notes. They're also a good source for finding bad-performing notes because their clients have them, and if you tell them, hey, I look at bad-performing notes, and they'll certainly remember you for when one comes up. It may only happen once a year, but when they know about it, they'll bring them to you. However, there are some other ways in which you can find the investors, and one of my most favorite ways is to go through the county courthouse records and look for notices of defaults that have occurred in the past and see if they were bought by individuals or an LLC sometimes with it. Sounds like a small business. And in that, I find people who have money. They're out there buying foreclosures.
That's awesome. That's a great way to do that. So just tell people how they can find that. They can simply go to their courthouse, correct?
Yep, go to the county recorder's office. Now, every county has different processes, different software. You just want to ask them, first of all, how do I find out a property that had a notice of default, an NOD on it? And they'll tell you sometimes they have different names for them, sometimes they have codes from them. And then many counties you can do this on the internet. And you'll learn some of our coaches here teach about going to a website called NetR Online, N-E-T, the letter R, online, O-N-L-I-N-E, .net. Yeah, .net. And that's a portal site. In other words, you go there and it has the map of the United States and all the states, and then you click on a state, it'll show you all the counties, and then you click on the county, it'll tell you if their records are online. But in any case, it'll probably take a phone call to the county recorder's office to find out what letters or what numbers or what code they use to notice these notices of defaults. And then you search for ones that were like 6 months ago or a year ago, and you start looking at them, then you see what happened on that. If they were bought, if the mortgage was bought by somebody at an auction, there'll be a new owner on there eventually. And if it comes out being James Smith Investments, that's somebody there in that community that buys those notes and buys foreclosed properties. So that's a person who has money. It's clear. That's what they do. They buy real estate. They buy mortgage notes.
Talmadge, so how many notes do you have coming due?
I own right now a little bit over 80 of them, and about 2/3 of them were delinquent notes when I bought them.
Really, you have over 80 notes right now.
Mm-hmm.
How exciting! That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was so easy to do through the years, you know. I mean, none of these are big notes. Most of them have monthly payments of maybe a couple of $100 a month. So it's just, I never paid very much for them. I doubt if I ever paid more than $20,000 for a note, and many, many of them I paid in the range of $5,000 or less.
Exactly.
So over the years, I think I probably have lost money over the years on maybe a bit more than half a dozen notes, and that's it.
Wow, that's great.
That means that what I'm saying is I never got back my 12 payments. Keep in mind that if I get back my 12 payments, I'm ahead. Everything they give me after that is ahead, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's pretty hard to lose money at this, actually.
I pay, you know. Okay, what's the downside of notes? All right, they pay slow. I bought this note. They told me they pay me on time. They're getting slower and slower. I'll have a talk with them. In fact, there's some other things I'll do that I'm going to show you in a minute. I'll talk with them. What's the problem here? You said you could pay this. Oh, you can't pay it because it's summertime and it's slow for the work you have. Okay, well, we'll write it so that during the summer you pay only 75% of normal, and then the rest of the year you pay the normal amount. And I'll take that extra 25% just for you. I'll take it and tack it on the back of the note. Every time you do that, it makes my note worth more, okay? All right? So that's one downside. We stop paying altogether. All right? That's a big downside. I'm going to show you some protections about that, but let me show you what you do. First of all, you always send a registered letter demanding the payment and the late fee, okay? If this goes on for 50 months, every single month, you do that time after time after time, okay? So there's a legal point for that. You want to make sure that you don't ever make it look as if you actually set up a precedent of not accepting payments. Because if they were smart enough to take you to court on that, it could be ruled, well, you didn't tell them to make the payment, so, you know, if they start right now, it's okay. All right?
Hi, my question is, if you do sell to an investor and then you've worked out a portion of it that you've sold to them, and let's say for some reason that the note payer stopped paying, are you liable to that investor if you sold a portion of it?
You're not, actually, because see, you've invested, he's invested, you've invested different amounts. Now, what I do, because I do this sometimes, but I have enough notes, I guarantee is the wrong word legally. Okay, so let me throw that out. But I assure them that if the note goes bad, I'll switch another note and give them a different note. And I do this just strictly to keep my reputation, okay? I don't want somebody getting messed up, giving me $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 and then for them not to get their money back. So, but you don't have to do that. You're both at risk. You're both partners in the note, and so if he loses, you lose also. You don't get your payments either. So that's legally, that makes it a lot safer to do this. But because I've accrued, in fact, I did this when I think the first time I did one of these where I shared a note, I only had about less than a dozen notes. But I was confident enough to just say, look, if this note goes bad, I'll give you the same equivalent amount. I think I sold a $600 payment. He got $300. I'll give you a $300 share of any other note that I have. And I'll take that note back and put it back in my portfolio, and I'll work on it and get it to perform again. Let me give you some details on stop paying. That doesn't mean that I still don't have an asset. So this is a mortgage on their home. Remember that. I could, in theory, if the cost is higher than I'd probably want to do, but I could foreclose on it. Normally, these are second position notes, so to foreclose, in most states, I would have to buy out the underlying first in order to protect my second. But I don't have to go that route. I can just hold on to that note, and I bill him every month. He doesn't make the payments. I do it by registered letter.
Right, but someday if that house sells, they're going to have to pay to transfer title.
You got it. I'm going to get paid off, and all the late payments, all the back payments are going to come back to me. Or they want to refinance, I get it paid. They don't have to sell the house. I'm going to get paid. Or they want to fix the roof or build a swimming pool, and so they go out and get a second mortgage. I'm in second position. That company, Wells Fargo Finance or Beneficial Finance, they're not going to go in third position. They're going to pay me off, and they're going to write him a note for whatever he wants, plus whatever it takes to pay me off.
You can never have. Okay. Thank you very much.